No one in the room realized the marriage had already ended. Not when Elena laughed too loudly at her own joke. Not when Nathaniel refilled her wine without looking at her. Not even when she said, "I want to live for myself." The end didn't begin with shouting. It began with a pause, and a man who chose not to react. The house was made of glass. Not entirely, but enough to feel like it. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around the living room, reflecting the gray Seattle sky and the curated life inside it. Everything was intentional. The white marble island, the soft beige couches, the carefully placed eucalyptus in a ceramic vase that Elena had once spent 20 minutes adjusting for a single Instagram story. Nathaniel had designed it that way. Open, transparent, unforgiving. Elena stood barefoot in the kitchen, her phone angled slightly upward, catching the morning light just right. She tilted her head, softened her eyes, and smiled, not at anything in particular, but at the version of herself she had learned to project. "Morning rituals," she whispered into the camera, starting the day grounded and grateful. She tapped the screen. Posted. Behind her, Nathaniel watched from the hallway. Not obviously, not in a way that could be accused. He leaned against the wall just long enough to observe the difference between the woman on camera and the one who immediately dropped her expression the moment the recording ended. The smile vanished first. Then her shoulders lowered, as if the performance itself had weight. She didn't notice him, or maybe she assumed he wasn't paying attention. That assumption had become her habit. "You're up early," she said, finally glancing over her shoulder. Nathaniel nodded once. "Couldn't sleep." She turned back to the counter, picking up her coffee as if the conversation had already ended. It usually did. Silence filled the space, but it wasn't empty. It was structured, controlled. Nathaniel walked into the kitchen, his footsteps quiet against the polished floor. He noticed everything. The second coffee cup in the sink, not from this morning. The faint scent of a cologne that wasn't his, subtle, almost erased. The way Elena kept her phone face down now. Small things. Insignificant on their own. Architectural flaws always started small. "You filming today?" he asked. "Just content," she replied casually. "Nothing major." He nodded again. "Nothing major." That was the phrase she used when something mattered more than it should. Nathaniel reached for a glass, filling it with water. His movements were precise, economical, like someone who had learned to minimize unnecessary gestures. "Elena." She paused, not turning yet. "Yes?" There was a moment, a fraction of a second, where something could have been said. A question, a confrontation, a crack. But Nathaniel didn't ask. Instead, he said, "We have dinner with my parents on Friday." She exhaled softly, almost inaudible. "Do we have to?" "Yes." A beat. "Okay." She picked up her phone again, conversation over. Nathaniel watched her thumb scroll, faster than necessary. Avoidant. He didn't need to see the screen. Not yet. Later that afternoon, while Elena was upstairs recording another segment, laughter echoing too brightly through the hallway, Nathaniel stood alone in the garage. The Tesla sat quietly, its polished surface reflecting the dim overhead light. He opened the driver's side door and slid into the seat. The dashboard lit up instantly. Clean. Minimal. Honest. He navigated through the system with practiced ease, his fingers moving without hesitation. Trip history. Locations. Timestamps. There it was. Tuesday. 2:14 p.m. A stop that didn't align with anything she had told him. A hotel. Not far, not hidden, just unexplained. Nathaniel stared at the screen. No reaction. No anger. Just confirmation. He didn't take a photo. He didn't confront her. He simply memorized it. Because truth, he believed, was not something you revealed immediately. It was something you assembled. Upstairs, Elena laughed again, louder this time. Nathaniel closed the car door softly. The house returned to silence. But something had shifted. Not visibly. Not yet. Inside, a structure had begun to crack, and only one of them knew it. The receipt wasn't meant to be found. It wasn't hidden well enough to be deliberate, but not careless enough to be obvious either. The kind of mistake people make when they believe they are still in control. Nathaniel noticed it on a Wednesday morning. It was folded once, tucked between 2 pages of a lifestyle magazine Elena had left open on the kitchen counter. A page about intentional living, minimalist aesthetics, emotional clarity, curated authenticity. He almost didn't pick it up. Almost. But something about the way the paper edge disrupted the clean line of the spread caught his eye. Nathaniel had spent his life noticing lines, where they aligned, where they didn't. He unfolded it slowly. A hotel receipt. Not expensive, not luxurious. That, in itself, was interesting. Elena had taste, or at least, she curated the illusion of it. The date, Tuesday. The time, 2:14 p.m. check-in. Nathaniel didn't react immediately. He didn't need to. His mind was already moving, not emotionally, but structurally. Like mapping a flaw in a building before deciding whether it was cosmetic or foundational. Tuesday. He replayed the day without effort. She had posted a self-care afternoon story at 1:02 p.m. Herbal tea, soft lighting, a caption about protecting your peace. By 3:30 p.m., she had uploaded a short video from home. Same outfit, same lighting. To anyone else, it aligned. To Nathaniel, it didn't. Because the Tesla logs didn't lie. He folded the receipt again, exactly as it had been, and placed it back between the pages. Not as a gesture of denial, as preservation. Evidence lost its value the moment it was disturbed too early. Elena came downstairs 20 minutes later, dressed in soft neutrals, her hair still slightly damp from the shower. She moved through the kitchen like she belonged in a commercial, fluid, effortless, rehearsed. "You're still here?" she asked, surprised. "I had a late start," Nathaniel replied. She poured herself coffee, not looking at him. "Busy day?" "A few meetings." She nodded, distracted. Same. Nathaniel watched her as she stirred her coffee, clockwise, always clockwise. A small habit, predictable, reliable. People liked to think their lives were complex, but their habits betrayed them. "You went out yesterday," he said, not as a question. Elena didn't freeze. She didn't hesitate. "Yeah," she said lightly. "Spa day." Nathaniel nodded once. "Good." That was it. No accusation, no follow-up, just acceptance. And that was the first moment Elena should have felt something was wrong, but she didn't. Because silence, to someone hiding something, often feels like safety. That night, Nathaniel sat in his study. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of his desk lamp. The house was quiet. Elena had gone to bed early, claiming exhaustion. He opened his laptop, not to confront, to build. He created a folder, no name, just a date. Inside it, he began to document. Tuesday, Tesla location logs. Tuesday, Instagram post timestamps. Tuesday, hotel receipt, mentally archived, to be retrieved later. He didn't rush. He didn't spiral. Every file was placed with intention, like components of a structure that would only make sense when complete. Because Nathaniel understood something Elena didn't. Truth wasn't powerful because it existed. It was powerful because of when and how it was revealed. Days passed. Nothing changed. Which, to Nathaniel, meant everything was changing. Elena became lighter. That was the first visible shift. She smiled more, but not at him. She spent longer on her phone, but angled away. She started going out more, always with reasons that sounded reasonable enough not to question. Lunch with friends, content shoots, me time. Nathaniel never stopped her, never asked for details, never checked her phone. He didn't need to, because patterns were louder than secrets. On Friday, Elena stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress before dinner with Nathaniel's parents. She looked flawless. She always did when it mattered. "Do I look okay?" she asked, almost absently. Nathaniel stood behind her, his reflection appearing beside hers. "You look perfect," he said. And he meant it. Perfection, after all, was often the most convincing disguise. She smiled faintly, satisfied. But as she turned away, her phone lit up on the vanity. Just for a second. Not long enough for a message to be read fully, but long enough for a name. Lucas. Nathaniel didn't move, didn't react. didn't even shift his gaze. Because reactions were currency, and he wasn't spending any yet. Dinner was normal. That was what made it unsettling. Elena laughed at the right moments. She held Nathaniel's arm when his mother spoke. She played the role flawlessly. Nathaniel participated just enough to maintain the illusion. But underneath, something had changed. Not in behavior, in intention. Every word Elena spoke was now data. Every gesture, a variable. Every inconsistency, a thread. And Nathaniel was no longer trying to understand his wife. He was studying her. Later that night, back home, Elena slipped into bed without much conversation. "I'm exhausted," she murmured. Nathaniel nodded from his side of the bed. "Get some rest." She turned away from him, phone in hand, screen dimmed, typing. Nathaniel stared at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her breaths, between her movements, between the subtle glow of the screen and the moment it disappeared. He didn't need to see the message. He already knew the conversation existed. The first crack in a structure is never loud. It doesn't shatter. It whispers. A misalignment, a shift, a detail that doesn't belong. And most people ignore it, because acknowledging it means accepting that something larger is already broken. But Nathaniel didn't ignore it. He documented it, preserved it, waited. Because he wasn't interested in catching Elena in a lie. He was building something far more precise. A moment where she would have no choice but to face the truth all at once. Not piece by piece, but all at once. Upstairs, Elena smiled at her phone in the dark. Downstairs, in the silence of his study, Nathaniel opened his laptop again and added a new file. Lucas. No last name. Not yet. But soon. Everything would have a name. Everything would have a place. And when it did, there would be no room left for denial. Elena stopped calling it a mistake. That was the first shift. At the beginning, there had been hesitation, small pauses before replying to Lucas's messages, a flicker of guilt when she caught her own reflection after leaving his apartment, the quiet, persistent thought that what she was doing had a name she didn't want to say out loud. Now, she had replaced that name with something softer, something kinder. I deserve this. It came easily now, like a mantra she no longer questioned. Lucas Hale didn't look like a complication. He looked like an answer. His apartment smelled like cedar and laundry detergent, clean in a way that felt unburdened by history. There were no shared memories here, no silent expectations, no invisible architecture pressing in on her from all sides. Just space. Just him. "You think too much," Lucas said, leaning against the kitchen counter as Elena stood barefoot on the cold tile, scrolling through her phone. She smirked faintly. "That's ironic, coming from someone who doesn't think at all." He laughed, easy, unfiltered. "I think, just not about things that don't matter." She glanced at him. "And what doesn't matter?" Lucas stepped closer, taking the phone gently from her hand and placing it face down on the counter. "This," he said. "All of it. The image, the rules, him. Him." He never said Nathaniel's name, as if refusing to acknowledge it made him irrelevant. Elena didn't correct him. Instead, she let out a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing in a way they never did at home. "You make it sound simple," she said. "It is simple," Lucas replied. "You're just used to making it complicated." That was how it worked. Lucas simplified. Nathaniel, structured. And somewhere in between, Elena had started to feel like she was suffocating. At least, that's what she told herself. "You don't love him," Lucas said one afternoon, his voice quieter this time, more deliberate. Elena hesitated. That word still had weight, still required something real. "I don't know," she admitted. Lucas studied her for a moment, then nodded, not disappointed, not surprised. "You don't have to figure it out right now," he said. "You just have to decide what you want." What you want. The phrase lingered. Because for the first time in a long time, Elena wasn't thinking about what was expected of her. She was thinking about what she could take. The transition from secrecy to entitlement wasn't sudden. It unfolded in layers. First, she stopped deleting messages immediately. Then, she stopped checking the time as obsessively. Then, she started leaving earlier and coming back later. Each step felt small. Each step felt justified. Nathaniel never asked. And that silence, that endless, unnerving silence, became her greatest excuse. If he cared, he would say something. If something was wrong, he would react. He always reacted, didn't he? Except now, he didn't. And Elena interpreted that absence not as awareness, but as absence of control. "You're still thinking about him," Lucas said one evening, his tone sharper than usual. They were lying in bed, the city lights casting fractured shadows across the walls. "I'm not," Elena replied quickly. "You are." She turned to face him. "Why does it matter?" Lucas sat up, running a hand through his hair. "Because I'm not going to be some distraction, Elena." "You're not," she insisted. "Then what am I?" The question hung between them, undefined, dangerous. Elena opened her mouth, then closed it. Because the truth was, she didn't have an answer that didn't complicate everything. Lucas watched her carefully, and for the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not doubt, expectation. "I need to know where this is going," he said. There it was. Not a demand, but a line. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She lay beside Lucas, staring at the ceiling, her mind moving in quiet, calculated loops. What did she want? Freedom. That was the word she kept returning to. Freedom from expectations. Freedom from structure. Freedom from the quiet, suffocating precision of a life that had already been designed for her. Nathaniel had built everything. The house. The stability. The version of her that the world admired. And somewhere along the way, she had started to feel like she was living inside something that didn't belong to her. Lucas, on the other hand, Lucas felt like something she chose. The next morning, Elena sat at the kitchen island, her laptop open, her phone beside it. Nathaniel stood across from her, pouring coffee. Routine. Predictable. Safe. "I'm thinking about doing something different," she said suddenly. Nathaniel didn't look up immediately. "Different how?" "Expanding my brand. Maybe investing in something." Now he looked at her. "Like what?" Elena hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Then she said, "A fitness space. Something more personal." Nathaniel's gaze held hers, steady, unreadable. "That's a big step," he said. "I know." "Have you thought it through?" "Yes." That was a lie, but it didn't feel like one, because in her mind, she had already justified it. Lucas needed support. She needed independence. Their marriage was already fading. What difference did it make? Nathaniel nodded slowly. "Then you should be careful," he said. Elena frowned slightly. "Careful about what?" "Mixing personal and financial decisions." There was something in his tone, not accusatory, not even warning, just precise, like he was placing a marker on something that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. Elena forced a small smile. "I'll be fine." "I'm sure you will." Later that day, she transferred the money. Not all at once, not recklessly, but deliberately. Enough to matter, enough to commit. As she confirmed the transaction, her heart raced, not with fear, but with something dangerously close to exhilaration. This was hers, her decision, her risk, her life. For the first time, she felt like she was in control. That evening, she told Lucas. His reaction wasn't what she expected. "You did what?" he asked, staring at her. "I invested," Elena said, her voice steady. "In us." Lucas ran a hand over his face, pacing the room. "Elena, this isn't how this works." "What do you mean?" "I didn't ask you for that." "I know. I wanted to. That's not the same thing." For a moment, something cold slipped into Elena's chest. A crack. Small, but real. "You said you wanted something real," she said quietly. "I do." "Then this is real." Lucas stopped pacing, looked at her, and didn't answer. Back at the house, Nathaniel sat in his study. The room was silent, orderly, controlled. He opened his laptop. A new notification blinked on the screen. Bank transfer confirmation. Joint account. Time-stamped. Documented. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanged. But something had settled. Not anger. Not even disappointment. finality. Because this was no longer suspicion. This was structure. Evidence that didn't just suggest betrayal. It proved intent. Upstairs, Elena stood in front of the mirror again, adjusting, perfecting, convincing herself. I want to live for myself, she whispered softly, as if saying it enough times would make it true in a way that didn't cost anything. But freedom, she was about to learn, always had a cost. And she had just paid the first irreversible installment. Downstairs, Nathaniel created another file. This one had a name. Financial breach. He didn't hesitate, didn't pause. Because the moment Elena believed she was taking control, she had already lost it. The envelope wasn't supposed to arrive at the house. That much was clear the moment Nathaniel saw it. It sat on the entryway table, tucked beneath a stack of lifestyle magazines and unopened mail, just visible enough to exist, just hidden enough to be missed by anyone not paying attention. White, standard, clinical, no branding on the front. But the return address, printed in small, sterile lettering in the top corner, gave it away instantly. A diagnostics lab. Nathaniel didn't touch it right away. He stood there for a moment, coat still on, briefcase in hand, looking at it the way one looks at something that confirms what they already know, but changes everything anyway. Upstairs, Elena's voice drifted faintly through the house. She was on a call, her tone light, animated. Performing. Always performing. Nathaniel stepped closer. He picked up the envelope. It was already opened. Not sealed again. Not carefully hidden. Just placed. As if she had intended to deal with it later. As if time could delay consequence. He didn't rush. Didn't tear it open like someone searching for answers. Because this wasn't a question anymore. It was verification. He slid the paper out slowly. One page. Minimal text. Clinical language stripped of emotion. And there it was. A diagnosis. Clear. Undeniable, time-stamped, recent. Nathaniel's eyes moved across the page once, then again. Not because he didn't understand it, but because understanding it meant accepting something irreversible. This wasn't suspicion. This wasn't interpretation. This was physical proof. Her body had carried a truth she hadn't spoken. Upstairs, Elena laughed softly at something on the call. The sound echoed down the staircase, bright, untouched. Nathaniel folded the paper along its original crease, placed it back inside the envelope, exactly as he had found it, because some things, once revealed, didn't need to be announced immediately. They needed to be placed correctly. When Elena came downstairs, she looked normal. That was the unsettling part. Her hair was pulled back loosely, her phone still in her hand, her expression relaxed in a way that suggested her world had not shifted. Not yet. "You're home early," she said. Nathaniel nodded. Meetings wrapped up. She walked past him, heading toward the kitchen, unaware of the envelope now resting exactly where it had been before. Or maybe, not unaware, just avoiding. "Did any mail come?" she asked casually, opening the fridge. Nathaniel watched her carefully. "Some." She didn't turn around. "Anything important?" A pause. Small. Controlled. Nathaniel answered evenly. "Depends on what you're expecting." That made her glance back. Just for a second. Too quick for most people to notice, but not for him. "Nothing urgent," she said, closing the fridge. "I'll check later." Nathaniel nodded. "Of course." The panic didn't come all at once. It never did. It began as a quiet awareness, a background noise Elena couldn't fully silence. She had taken the test a week ago. A precaution, she told herself. Something responsible. Something separate from everything else. Because what she had with Lucas was different. Clean. Intentional. That's what she had believed. Until the result came back. And suddenly, everything she had carefully separated, emotion, desire, consequence, collapsed into one undeniable reality. She hadn't told Lucas. Not yet. She hadn't told Nathaniel. Not ever, if she could help it. Because saying it out loud would make it real in a way she couldn't control. So she placed the envelope on the table. Not hidden, not exposed. Just deferred. That night, Elena lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Nathaniel was beside her, his breathing slow, even, as if nothing had changed, as if he didn't know. but something about his stillness felt different, too precise, too intentional. "You're quiet," she said softly. "I usually am," he replied. She swallowed. "That's not what I mean." Nathaniel turned his head slightly, looking at her in the dim light. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, because she didn't know how to ask the question without revealing the fear behind it, without exposing the possibility that something had already slipped beyond her control. "Nothing," she said finally. "Forget it." Nathaniel held her gaze for a moment longer, then nodded. "All right." Silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had weight, edges, meaning. Downstairs, the envelope remained where it was, unmoved, unacknowledged, but no longer harmless. The next morning, Elena checked it, the moment she was alone. Her hands moved quickly, unfolding the paper, scanning the result again as if it might have changed overnight. It hadn't. Her chest tightened, not just from the diagnosis, but from something deeper, a realization she didn't want to fully form. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was traceable, provable, dangerous. She folded the paper again, more carefully this time, slid it back into the envelope. And for the first time since all of this began, she hesitated. Because control, she realized, wasn't just about what you did. It was about what you could contain. And this was starting to leak. Nathaniel watched her from the hallway, not directly, just enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the way her movements had lost their fluidity, the way she looked around the room before placing the envelope back down, as if the house itself might be watching her. He stepped back before she could notice, because observation required distance and timing. Later that afternoon, Nathaniel sat in his study again. The same desk, the same light, the same quiet precision. He opened his laptop, created a new file. He didn't name it immediately. He stared at the blank text field for a moment, then typed, "Medical evidence." He paused, then added a timestamp, and beneath it a single line, "Confirmed." No emotion, no commentary, just fact. Because facts, unlike words, didn't need to be defended. Upstairs, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her phone in her hand, Lucas's name on the screen. She stared at it for a long time before typing. "We need to talk." She didn't send it immediately. Her thumb hovered over the screen, because something had shifted, not in what she wanted, but in what it would cost. Downstairs, Nathaniel closed his laptop. For the first time since the receipt, since the logs, since the small, quiet inconsistencies, he allowed himself a single, contained thought. There was no misunderstanding left. The structure wasn't cracking anymore. It was compromised. And once a foundation was compromised, there was no repair, only collapse. That night, Elena turned off her phone earlier than usual. She didn't text Lucas, didn't scroll, didn't perform. She lay in silence, her back turned to Nathaniel, her breathing uneven despite her efforts to control it. Nathaniel lay beside her, still, unmoving, watching the darkness instead of her, because he didn't need to look anymore. He already knew. And knowledge, real knowledge, didn't provoke reaction. It provoked decision. Elena thought she was still managing the situation, containing it, delaying it, but the truth had already moved beyond her reach. It existed now, outside of her, documented, structured, waiting. And Nathaniel, for the first time, was no longer searching for the truth. He was deciding when to use it. The decision didn't feel like betrayal when Elena made it. It felt like alignment. She sat at the kitchen island again, the same place where she had filmed countless morning routines, where she had spoken about balance, clarity, intentional living. Now, her laptop screen glowed with something far less aesthetic. Banking interface, joint account, numbers that didn't belong solely to her. For a moment, she hesitated, not because she thought it was wrong, but because she understood, somewhere deep beneath the layers of justification, that this wasn't just emotional anymore. This was measurable, traceable, permanent. Her phone buzzed softly beside her. A message from Lucas. We need to move fast. Lise won't wait. She exhaled slowly. Of course it wouldn't. Nothing waited. Not desire, not opportunity, not consequences. Lucas had started talking about the gym like it was inevitable. Not a dream, a plan. A space of his own. A business that would finally give him independence. At first, Elena had listened. Then she had encouraged. And now, she was involved. You said you wanted something real, she had told him days earlier. I do, Lucas had replied, but real doesn't mean reckless. She had smiled then, because in her mind, this wasn't reckless. This was commitment. Back at the island, her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The amount was already entered. Not everything, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to bind. She told herself it was temporary. An investment. A bridge. A step toward the life she was choosing. Because that's how she framed it now. A choice. Not an escape. Not a mistake. A decision. Upstairs, the house remained silent. Too silent. Nathaniel wasn't home yet. Or at least, that's what she believed. She clicked confirm. The system processed for a second. Then, transaction complete. Just like that. No sound. No warning. No visible consequence. Elena stared at the screen. Waiting. For what, she wasn't sure. A feeling, maybe. Relief. Freedom. Something that would tell her she had done the right thing. But what came instead was a brief, almost imperceptible shift in her chest. Not fear, not regret, just awareness. Like stepping off a ledge and realizing, mid-air, that there's no way back up. She closed the laptop quickly, too quickly, as if speed could erase the act. Her phone buzzed again. Lucas. Did you do it? She typed back, yes. A pause, then, we're really doing this. Elena stared at the message. The words felt heavier now. Not exciting, not light, real. In the garage, Nathaniel sat inside the Tesla, engine off, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. He hadn't entered the house yet. He didn't need to, because the notification had already appeared. Quiet, immediate, precise. Joint account activity detected. He opened the banking app, reviewed the transaction. Amount, timestamp, destination account. No reaction crossed his face, but something inside him settled into place. Not suspicion, not confirmation, something more final. Structure. Because this wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. This was action. Deliberate. Documented. Legally relevant. He didn't go inside right away. Instead, he sat there for a moment longer, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the act fully register, not emotionally, but strategically. Because this changed everything. Not in how he felt, but in what he could do. Inside the house, Elena stood by the window, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. She looked composed, but her hands were still, too still, as if movement might trigger something she couldn't contain. She whispered softly to herself, "It's my life." The words sounded thinner this time, less convincing. The front door opened. Nathaniel stepped inside, calm, measured, exactly as always. "You're home," Elena said, turning toward him. "I am." A pause, brief, controlled. "How was your day?" she asked. "Productive." He set his keys down, removed his jacket. Everything in its place. Everything where it belonged. Except now, something didn't. Elena watched him carefully. Too carefully. "Did you eat?" she asked. "Not yet." "I can make something." "That's okay." Another pause. Longer this time. Because something between them had shifted, and neither of them acknowledged it directly. Nathaniel walked past her, heading toward his study. "Elena." She turned. "Yes?" He stopped just short of the doorway, not looking at her immediately. Then, "You should be careful." Her breath caught slightly. "About what?" Nathaniel glanced back, his expression unreadable. Decisions that can't be undone. The words landed quietly, but they didn't feel like a warning. They felt like placement, like something being set exactly where it belonged, waiting to be understood later. Elena forced a small laugh. You're being dramatic. Am I? He held her gaze for a moment longer, then stepped into the study, closing the door behind him. Inside, Nathaniel sat down at his desk, opened his laptop. The same folder, the same structure, but now, a new layer. He created another file. This one didn't require thought. Financial breach, confirmed. He attached the transaction record. Timestamp intact. Account details visible. Irrefutable. He leaned back slightly. Not satisfied. Not relieved. Just aligned. Because the moment Elena transferred that money, she hadn't just crossed an emotional boundary. She had crossed a line that couldn't be negotiated, couldn't be softened, couldn't be explained away. Upstairs, Elena sat on the edge of the bed again, phone in hand, Lucas's messages continuing. Plans, ideas, future. She read them all. But something had changed. Not in what she wanted, but in how it felt. Because for the first time, she realized she wasn't just moving towards something. She was leaving something behind, irrevocably. Downstairs, Nathaniel closed his laptop. The room fell into silence again. But it wasn't the same silence as before. This one had direction, purpose, timing. The structure wasn't just compromised anymore. It was scheduled to collapse. And Elena still believed she had time. But time, Nathaniel understood better than anyone, wasn't something you had. It was something you used. And she had just given him everything he needed. This was the point of no return. Not because of what she felt, not because of who she chose, but because of what she did. Because some betrayals could be denied. Some could be hidden. Some could even be forgiven. But this one was recorded. And once something was recorded, it didn't disappear. It waited for the exact moment it would destroy everything. The house didn't feel different. That was the most dangerous part. Nothing was broken. Nothing was loud. Nothing demanded attention. The eucalyptus still stood in its ceramic vase. The marble island still reflected morning light. Elena still filmed her routines, still smiled into the camera, still said things like, "Protect your peace," with practiced softness. But Nathaniel had changed. Not visibly. Not in a way anyone could point to and name. He simply withdrew. He stopped asking. That was the first shift Elena noticed and misunderstood. No more, "Where are you going?" No more, "When will you be back?" No more quiet acknowledgments of her schedule. Instead, there was nothing. Absence disguised as trust. Or at least, that's how she chose to interpret it. "You've been really chill lately," Elena said one afternoon, leaning against the kitchen counter, watching him scroll through something on his tablet. Nathaniel didn't look up immediately. "Have I?" "Yeah," she said, half laughing. No questions, no comments. "It's new." He nodded slightly. "I figured you preferred it that way." She studied him. There was no edge in his tone, no accusation, just compliance. And somehow, that made her feel powerful. "I do," she said. "It feels healthier." Nathaniel finally looked at her. "I'm glad." That word echoed longer than it should have, because there was nothing in his expression that suggested relief, only distance. Elena leaned into it. Of course she did, because when resistance disappears, people don't question it. They expand. Her time with Lucas became less careful, less calculated. She stopped checking the time obsessively before coming home, stopped deleting every message, stopped rehearsing explanations. Because why would she? Nathaniel wasn't looking. Nathaniel wasn't reacting. Nathaniel wasn't anything. "You're thinking about leaving him, aren't you?" Lucas asked one evening, his voice quieter, more grounded than before. They were sitting on the floor of the unfinished gym space, exposed concrete, metal frames, the raw outline of something that could become real. Elena didn't answer immediately. but she didn't deny it either. "I'm thinking about what comes next," she said. Lucas nodded slowly. "And he doesn't know?" She hesitated, then shook her head. "No." Lucas let out a breath, leaning back against the wall. "Then you need to tell him." The words landed heavier than expected. "Why?" Elena asked, her tone sharpening slightly. "So he can try to stop me?" Lucas looked at her. "He doesn't strike me as someone who begs." Elena frowned. "He doesn't strike me as anything anymore." That was the problem. Nathaniel had become unreadable. And in that absence of clarity, Elena filled in the blanks with what she wanted to believe. That he didn't care. That he hadn't noticed. That she was already free. That night, she stayed out later than usual. Not because she needed to, but because she could. Nathaniel noticed the time. Of course he did. He noticed everything. 10:42 p.m., not home. 11:17 p.m., car still not in the driveway. 11:56 p.m., front door finally opens. He sat in the living room, lights dimmed, a glass of water untouched on the table beside him. Elena stepped inside, her movements slightly too careful. "You're still up?" she asked. "Yes." No follow-up, no tension, just presence. She slipped off her shoes, placing them neatly by the door. "I lost track of time," she said lightly. Nathaniel nodded once. "It happens." That was it. No interrogation, no reaction. And that was the moment Elena stopped fearing him. Completely. Upstairs, she changed, her reflection catching her eye in the mirror. There was something different now. Confidence. Not the curated kind she showed online, but something sharper, more dangerous, because it wasn't based on truth. It was based on assumption. Downstairs, Nathaniel opened his laptop. The timeline was complete, every detail placed, every inconsistency aligned. Messages, receipts, location data, medical records, financial transfers. Not scattered, structured. Like a story that couldn't be argued with, because it didn't rely on interpretation. Only sequence. He watched it once, from beginning to end. No emotion, just observation. Timing, pacing, silence between frames. Because silence was where understanding lived. He closed the laptop slowly. The plan wasn't just ready, it was precise. Upstairs, Elena texted Lucas. Soon. Downstairs, Nathaniel checked the date. Friday. Dinner. His parents. All variables accounted for. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was waiting. No one expected anything unusual. That was what made it perfect. The dining table was set exactly as it always was. Nathaniel's mother had arranged everything with careful attention. Polished silverware, folded linen napkins, candles placed just far enough apart to create warmth without distraction. Normal, familiar, safe. Elena played her role flawlessly. She smiled. She laughed. She reached for Nathaniel's hand once, briefly, a gesture so natural it would have convinced anyone watching. Anyone except him. "How's work been?" his father asked. "Busy," Nathaniel replied, "but productive." Elena nodded beside him. "He's been incredible lately," she added, "really focused." Nathaniel glanced at her. Just for a second, then back to his plate. Dinner moved smoothly. Conversations overlapped. Wine was poured. Nothing felt tense, because tension, when perfectly controlled, becomes invisible. Dessert arrived, a soft pause in the evening. The moment when conversations slow, when attention drifts, when people let their guard down. Nathaniel stood, not abruptly, not dramatically, just deliberately. "I put something together," he said. Elena looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" He didn't answer her directly. Instead, he walked to the side of the room, where a screen was mounted against the wall, usually used for family photos, holiday slideshows, harmless memories. "I thought it might be useful," Nathaniel continued, his tone calm, almost thoughtful. His mother smiled faintly. "A presentation at dinner? That's new." A light laugh, soft, unaware. Elena's stomach tightened. just slightly. "What is this?" she asked, her voice quieter now. Nathaniel met her eyes. For the first time in weeks, there was something there. Not anger, not pain. Clarity. "You'll see." He pressed play. The first frame appeared. A timestamp. Tuesday, 1:02 p.m. An Instagram story. Elena, smiling into the camera. Self-care afternoon. The second frame. 2:14 p.m. Tesla location log. A hotel. The third. A receipt. Same date, same time. Silence settled over the table. Not immediate, but growing, expanding. Elena's breath slowed, then stopped. Frame after frame. Messages. Names. Lucas. Fragments of conversations. Enough to understand. Not enough to deny. Her mother-in-law shifted slightly in her seat. "What is this?" she asked, her voice uncertain. Nathaniel didn't look away from the screen. A timeline. The next frame. A document. Clinical. Unemotional. A diagnosis. Elena's hand tightened around the edge of the table. Her vision narrowed, because now there was no interpretation left. The final frame. A bank transfer. Amount. Timestamp. Account details. Silence. Complete. Unavoidable. No one spoke, because no one needed to. Understanding didn't arrive in words. It arrived all at once. Elena looked at Nathaniel. Really looked at him. For the first time, she saw it. Not absence. Not passivity. Control. "You," her voice broke. "You went through my things?" Nathaniel turned to her. Calm. Measured. "No," he said. "You left them where I could see." Her chest tightened. "This is insane," she whispered. What is it, Elena?" he asked quietly. The question wasn't loud, but it cut through everything. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because every version of the truth was already on the screen. Nathaniel stepped closer to the table. Not aggressive, not confrontational, just present. "I wanted to be sure," he said. A pause. Then, "Now I am." His mother stood slowly, shock written across her face. His father said nothing, because there was nothing left to ask. Elena felt it then. Not guilt, not regret. Collapse. Not because she had been caught, but because she had never been in control. The room didn't explode. There was no shouting, no chaos, just silence. Heavy. Final. Nathaniel reached for the remote, paused the video on the last frame. The transfer. "I think that covers everything," he said. And in that moment, everything ended. Not loudly, not violently, but completely. Elena's world didn't shatter in pieces. It dissolved. All at once. Because the most devastating truths aren't the ones you hear. They're the ones you can't deny. The silence didn't end when the video stopped. It followed Elena out of the house. It clung to her skin, settled into her lungs, echoed in every space where words should have been. No one asked her to stay. That was the first consequence. Nathaniel didn't raise his voice, didn't demand explanations, didn't even look at her again after he turned off the screen. He simply stepped aside, and that, more than anything, told her she no longer belonged there. Elena walked out without her coat, without her bag, without anything that resembled control. The night air hit her sharply, but she barely felt it. Her hands trembled, not from cold, but from the sudden, violent absence of the life she had just lost. Behind her, the door closed, softly, final. She sat in her car for a long time before turning the engine on. Her phone buzzed. Once, then again, then relentlessly. Notifications stacked over each other. Messages, missed calls, social media alerts. She didn't open them immediately, because she already knew. By the time she finally looked, it had started. A clip. Short, cropped, silent. Someone at the dinner had recorded it. Of course they had. The screen, the timestamps, Her face in the corner, frozen, exposed, unraveling. Posted, shared, reposted. The captions varied, but the meaning didn't. Influencer exposed. Perfect life, perfect lie. Caught in real time. Elena's breath hitched, not in surprise, in recognition. Because this was the part she had never accounted for. Not Nathaniel's reaction, not the evidence, but the audience. Her brand had always been built on control, carefully curated vulnerability, selective honesty, a life designed to be admired. Now, that same audience was watching her fall, in real time. She tried calling Lucas, once, twice, 3 times. No answer. By the 4th attempt, her hands were shaking. "Pick up," she whispered. "Please, just pick up." The call went to voicemail. Again. When he finally texted, it wasn't what she expected. What the hell is going on? No concern, no reassurance, no, "Are you okay?" Just distance. Immediate. Defensive. Elena stared at the message, her chest tightening. "We need to talk," she typed. The response came slower this time. Longer pause, more space. Then, "I didn't sign up for this, Elena." Something inside her dropped. Not cracked, not shifted, dropped. She called him again. This time, he answered. "What is this?" Lucas's voice was sharp, low, controlled in a way she had never heard before. "I didn't know it would," she started. "You didn't know?" he cut in. "You didn't think this would come out?" "I thought I could handle it." "You said he didn't know." The words landed harder than anything else. Because now, she heard it. Not accusation, not betrayal. Disappointment. "I was going to tell him," she said, her voice breaking. "When?" Lucas asked. "After what? After you dragged me into whatever this is?" "I didn't drag you. You transferred money, Elena." Silence. Because that was undeniable. Lucas exhaled sharply. "I can't be part of this," he said. Her heart stuttered. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm done." The words were clean, simple, final. "No," she whispered. "You don't mean that." "I do." "You said we were building something." "I said I wanted something real," Lucas replied. "This isn't real. This is damage." The line went quiet. Not disconnected, just empty. "Lucas?" she said softly. No answer. Then, the call ended. Elena sat there, phone still pressed to her ear, long after the silence had become absolute. By morning, everything was gone. Not gradually, not in stages, all at once. Her brand deals paused, then terminated. Emails flooded in with identical language. "Due to recent events, we regret to inform this no longer aligns with our values." Her follower count dropped. Rapidly. Publicly. Every refresh, a loss. Every comment, a judgment. Her name trended, not as inspiration, as warning. And the worst part was that none of it was exaggerated. None of it was false. Every piece of it was built on truth. Across the city, Nathaniel sat in his office, calm, composed, untouched. He had already filed the paperwork. Separation, financial protection, legal documentation supported by everything he had collected. Precise, complete. There were no loose ends. Because he hadn't acted in anger, he had acted in sequence. His phone buzzed once, a message from Elena. Just 2 words. "Please talk." Nathaniel read it. Didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to clarify. That evening, he returned to the house. It felt different now. Not emptier, just his. The eucalyptus had dried slightly at the edges. The light fell the same way across the marble, but the silence. The silence was no longer waiting. It was settled. Nathaniel walked through each room slowly, not reminiscing, not reflecting, just confirming. In the bedroom, Elena's side of the closet was still full. Clothes, shoes, pieces of a life she had believed she controlled. He closed the door, gently. Some things didn't need to be removed. They needed to be left behind. Weeks passed. Elena moved into a small apartment across the city. No glass walls, no curated light, no audience, just space. Real space, unfiltered. She stopped posting. Not intentionally. She simply had nothing left to say. One night, she sat on the floor, her back against the wall, her phone dark in her hand. No messages, no notifications, no one waiting. For the first time, she was alone with the version of herself she had tried so hard to avoid. "I wanted to live for myself," she whispered. The words echoed differently now. Not empowering, not liberating, just true. Because she had. And this was what it looked like. Across the city, Nathaniel stood by the window of his office. The skyline stretched out before him. Clean lines, defined structures, everything in its place. He didn't feel victorious. He didn't feel relieved. He felt aligned. Because in the end, he hadn't destroyed anything. He had simply revealed what was already broken. And once the truth was seen, there was no rebuilding it. Only moving forward, alone, but intact.